Video about my 2-month-long journey across the United States, where I hit 17 different national parks, drove about 12,000 miles. Main focus of the trip was national parks. Really just wanted to get out and see America. I was working a corporate job for about a year or so, saving up money. I wasn't entirely unhappy, but I wasn't entirely happy either. I decided that I wanted to do something kind of crazy, something bucket list worthy. While I was still young and still able to travel with minimal responsibilities, no wife, no kids, just me. So that was really the inspiration behind this trip. I'd say it took around 2 or 3 months of planning, but I didn't really plan like I didn't have like a day-to-day schedule, like okay, day 7 I'm going here and doing specifically this. It was more just kind of play it by ear and see where I end up along the way. I started my journey outside Philadelphia. My first stop was Pittsburgh, then I went into Canton, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, Dayton, Ohio, up to Detroit, Michigan, across Michigan down, and then out to Milwaukee, Minneapolis. 2 weeks in is when I got to Badlands National Park in South Dakota. And if I had to redo the trip, I definitely would spend less time in the cities and more time out in the national parks. Those were really where I was at. I love hiking, camping, all that. The first national park I saw was Cuyahoga Valley National Park in Ohio, which is about a half hour or so south of Cleveland. That was a nice park, but compared to the other national parks out west, it wasn't anything too special. I mean, it's Ohio, so what are you gonna do? So my first real stop was in Badlands National Park in South Dakota. Stayed there July 5th into the 6th. It's a beautiful park. I like it because it's a desert landscape. Like driving up through it, like 90% of driving across South Dakota, pretty flat and like not very interesting. But Badlands, it's a desert park, but it has a lot of varied textures and just hills and valleys. Nothing too crazy, but bigger than I would expect. And after Badlands, I went to Mount Rushmore and the Black Hills National Forest in South Dakota. I was actually quite impressed with Mount Rushmore. I wasn't originally really planning on seeing it. I always kind of thought it'd be cool, but when I first drove by it, it was so crowded. I was like, I don't know if I want to do it, but I decided to do it anyway. I'm really glad I did. It was a really cool experience. Definitely recommended. My next park, and one of the parks I was looking forward to the most, was Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. And this park is absolutely beautiful. It totally lives up to the hype. Amazing place. When I was there, I mostly stayed on the roads. I didn't do a whole lot of like off-trail hiking, mostly just because I was by myself and I just wasn't too familiar with the parks yet. I did a lot more hiking by myself once I got further out west and just became more comfortable with hiking by myself. But when I was in Yellowstone, I wasn't quite ready for that yet. Still just like a little freaked out by bears. Yeah, the Yellowstone area has a high population density of grizzlies. So I was keeping that in mind. Bought some bear spray at the Yellowstone camp store. Kept that on me. Luckily, never had to use that like at all on my trip. I always brought that hiking pretty much anywhere I went, especially when I was by myself, which was most of the time. But some of my favorite parts of Yellowstone: waterfall. Old Faithful Geyser.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Wow, baby, look at that.
Of course, which was extremely crowded. There was at least seating for 1,000, if not more. It seemed around the geyser, maybe not quite 1,000, but not far off of it. After Yellowstone, my next stop was Glacier National Park in northwestern Montana. Also an amazing park, super big. There's like over 700 hiking trails. I was there for a couple days. The first hike I did was the Avalanche Trail. This is one of the most popular trails in the park for good reason. It's a beautiful hike thing, the whole hike up and back. Took about like 3 or 4 hours, and that was mostly just because there was so much traffic on the trail. Nice stream along the trail pretty much the whole way, and you lead up to the lake, and then the glaciers are melting down in the lake, and it's just awesome. Beautiful, beautiful park. The water was unbelievably clear. I had never seen water so clear. The next day at Glacier, I hiked the Highland Trail. This one was not. This one was a little more exposed, out in the sun. It was pretty hot when I was doing it. I didn't quite make it all the way. I was just getting too hot and too tired, just in the sun the entire time. But there's amazing views of the mountains the entire way. It was great. Just absolutely beautiful park. It's amazing how much bigger the mountains are out on the west coast. Being from Pennsylvania, the highest elevation mountains we have around here are like maybe a couple thousand feet. And out west they get like above 8, 9, 10,000, way up there. And absolutely beautiful. After Glacier, I went to Washington. I was out near Spokane for a day, and then I went in Seattle. I had some cousins in Seattle, hung out with them for a day or two, and then went up to Vancouver. Vancouver was amazing too. It's a beautiful, beautiful city. I love how the mountains are right in the background. They got the beach, and it's just amazing. Also did a wonderful hike there, the Lake Garibaldi Trail in Squamish, British Columbia. Absolutely beautiful hike. It's probably my favorite hike of the entire trip. It was a real long one. It was about 19 miles altogether. My cousin and I hiked up to Garibaldi Lake, which was about 3 hours to there, and then we kept going up into the Highline Meadows, and that was like maybe another 2 hours up there, and that was with some rest along the way. There's just 3 hours and 2 hours of like actual hiking. We started the hike at around 11 a.m. and we got back to the car at 10 p.m. So yeah, around 11 hours on the mountain. I was gassed after that. Most steps I'd ever taken in a day, I think it was around like 50,000 or so. It's pretty insane, but I was really glad I did it. It was the longest hike I'd ever done until that point. And I always thought about that hike when I was on other hikes after that, thinking, hey, you know, if I could do that Garibaldi Lake Trail, then I can do this. If you're ever out in the British Columbia area, I highly recommend going up to Squamish, checking out the Garibaldi Lake Trail. I'm sure there's some other amazing trails out there too, but that was just the one I saw, and it was highly, highly recommended. After Vancouver, I came back down into Washington and went around Olympic National Park for a few days. Again, another amazing park. Just it's a whole other world out there. The Pacific Northwest was definitely my favorite part of the country. I really like the mountains and just the vegetation and all that. Like, it was just a beautiful area. And I was there in July, so it was perfect. I didn't get any rain when I was there. Just sunny and beautiful every day, but not too hot. It was amazing. Really liked that area a lot. After Olympic National Park, I went down to the Redwoods in Northern California. Amazing area. Did some more great hiking there, just absolutely wonderful trails. I love how dog friendly everyone is out there. Almost everyone has their dog off a leash, which is amazing. In Pennsylvania, you get like fined and all that for having your dog off your leash, and people just seem to be a lot more wary of dogs on the East Coast, whereas on the West Coast, almost everyone seems to be a dog person. So my first day in the Redwood National Forest, I hiked the Skunk Cabbage Trail, which is not far from the coastline, and it was about a 5-mile hike out. About first 90% of the hike was through the woods, and then the last 10% was on the beach, and it was amazing. I walked out on this beach, and just everywhere you looked, just no one there, just clear beach, both directions. Never had seen a beach like that where I was the only one out there. I'm used to the Jersey Shore where you're never the only person out there. There's so many people. I only saw one other person on the trail, and it was maybe a 4 or 5 hour hike altogether. And then my second day in the Redwoods, I hiked the Berry Lane Pass Trail, which was another amazing hike. I was starting to wonder if there's any bad ones out there out on the West Coast. After the Redwoods, spent some time in San Francisco. Beautiful city, really like San Fran a lot. I don't know if I could live there, it's expensive, but really beautiful city, can't deny that. Got good weather when I was there too, so I really can't complain. After San Francisco, next was Yosemite National Park. which is about 4 hours east of San Fran. This was definitely one of my top parks too. It was just unbelievable how tall some of the rock formations are there. It's so big and just an amazing park. It's like there's so much to explore there. I was only there for a couple days. That goes for a lot of these parks. I know I could have spent 2-3 weeks in each one of these parks alone. If I had the time, I definitely would have liked to. When I was in Yosemite, my first day, I hiked the Sentinel Dome and Taft Point, and that was amazing. The Sentinel Dome was probably my favorite view of the entire park. Amazing 360 views around the whole park. You can just see the whole valley. You can see Half Dome. Great spot. Before I went to Yosemite, I did go to Lake Tahoe. In Lake Tahoe, I hiked the Cold Creek, the High Meadows Trail, which was a hiking / mountain biking trail. I saw a fair amount of mountain bikers while on the trail. That was another great hike through the woods, so it wasn't too hot, and then you come out in this nice meadow with a great view of the mountain range. Beautiful hike. Heading towards Yosemite from Lake Tahoe, I did the Lake Lundy Trail, which was great too. Amazing views. At one point the trail was almost more like a stream than the trail, and I had to just walk through water essentially.
Just came down from there, that water. Over grass patch here, over that spot. That's the trail.
I was definitely glad I had hiking boots that were waterproof. That hike ended up leading up to a lake with, again, amazing views of the mountains right there. And I was the only one up at the lake. It was awesome having the whole thing to myself. Just sat there, ate lunch. My second day in Yosemite, I did the Vernal Falls Trail. I got to the parking lot around 8 o'clock. I saw the Vernal Falls. And I forget the name of the other waterfall, but that was amazing too. You can see Half Dome and the waterfall. Such a beautiful park. I really can't say enough about it. If you're ever in that area, highly recommended. After Yosemite was Sequoia National Park. I tried to go see the giant sequoia tree monument, but the parking lot was just so packed, it wasn't worth it. After that, I sped up my trip a little bit because I was already on the road for about a month and a half, maybe almost 2 months at this point. After spending so much time on the road, don't get me wrong, I love it. It's amazing. It's so worth it. Like the hikes and everything, it's all worth it. And I spent a lot of time camping. Spent a lot of nights camping, either in or around national forests or national parks. National forests are really great and highly recommend, and all the ones I stayed at were free. The only ones I paid for were ones that had showers, but the free campsites is definitely the way to go if you're trying to save money and spend the most amount of time you can in nature, which is what I was looking for. So that was perfect for me. I just had a little 2-man tent. So after California, I did a pretty long drive to the Grand Canyon in Arizona, which was great too. The only bad thing was it was like really hot when I was there. It was pushing like 110. Like I remember I got up at like 5:30, maybe when I went to the Grand Canyon. I camped about half hour south of Grand Canyon, and I got up that early to try and beat the heat. And I was gonna do a moderate hike through the canyon, but even after just getting there at like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, I could tell the heat was already extreme, and I didn't want to deal with that. So I just walked around the edge of the canyon a little bit and just left later that day. Grand Canyon is really cool, but at that point I had been to so many parks, didn't quite have the same effect you think it might. Still a beautiful park. Like I said, I'm just more a fan of the forest and mountain areas as opposed to the deserts. So after Grand Canyon, I went up to Utah to go to Zion National Park. Like I said, I wasn't not a huge fan of the deserts, but I really liked Utah because of the uniqueness of the desert. It wasn't just flat, a little bit more varied scenery, and it was just amazing to think that the canyon and just everything had formed. It's all just like natural formations over millions and millions of years of rain and water flowing through the canyon and just carving out the rock. I hiked the Narrows Trail, which is probably the most if not the most popular trail in Zion. Super crowded. It's like a 2-mile, it's essentially a sidewalk down until you get to the Narrows. I wanted to go down the Narrows, but my boots were not tall enough. I knew my boots were just gonna get soaked. It wasn't worth it. After Zion, I went to Bryce Canyon. I really liked Bryce Canyon a lot. I did a fantastic hike there. I parked at Bryce Point, and I took the shuttle to Sunrise Point, and then hiked back down from Sunrise Point to Bryce Point, which is maybe a 2 or 3 hour hike. And it was nice because it was mostly downhill the whole way, about 5 miles. I did go off the trail a couple times because there's points where this is a hiking trail and this is a horse trail, but it's really hard to tell when you're on it. And I accidentally went down the horse trail more than once, and you can tell you're on the horse trail when you're seeing a lot less people and a lot more horse shit. So I knew that I was going the wrong way, had to backtrack a couple times, but worth it. Some amazing views in Bryce Canyon. I really liked Bryce Canyon a lot. It's probably my favorite park in Utah. After Bryce Canyon was Capitol Reef, which is very cool too. That one, I hiked the Frying Pan Trail to Cassidy Arch, which is about 4 miles each way. It was pretty warm from the start and boiling hot by 1 or 2 p.m., which is when I got back to the car, finished the hike. And I had totally forgotten when I left initially that there was a small river, like right by the parking lot. All I thought about was it'd be so nice to dip in a pool right now, like, oh, that sounds amazing. Lo and behold, like I said, I forgot about the river, so I was ecstatic when I found out I could just sit in the river. I just sat in there for maybe 10-15 minutes. It felt incredible. That was probably one of the best ways to beat the heat after a hike. After Capitol Reef, the next day I went to Arches and Canyonland. Got up early to do the Delicate Arch hike, which was great. I started hiking around 6 a.m. and there was already 100 or so people on the trail at that point, and just more and more coming. So it's clearly a very popular hike. The Delicate Arch is really cool, probably the most famous arch from Arches National Park. After Utah and continuing to go further back east, I went into Colorado, went to Mesa Verde National Park. Next day, I did a hike near Durango, Colorado.
Hiking near Durango, Colorado today. Just hiked about 2.5 miles up to this point. Very nice views all around. But mainly down there.
Which is a small mountain town. Beautiful area. I really liked how there's mountains surrounding the town. The next day, I hiked in Ouray, Colorado. Sort of similar to Durango, another small town. The trail around it, really nice trail too. The town just in the middle. Beautiful area. I really liked how there's mountains surrounding the town, and the town just in the middle. And the hike I did, you kind of go up and around. And I was gonna try and hike around the whole town, but unfortunately, as I got maybe a quarter of the way in, saw lightning on the radar, I just decided to turn around. And thankfully I did, because the lightning struck almost immediately when I got back to the car. So I'm really glad I decided to turn around. And later that night, I forget exactly where I camped, but it was a campsite I found on free campgrounds. It was off a beaten path. There were some other people around the area. Within a 200, 300 foot radius of my site, there was maybe 4, 5, 6 other people. Right as I got there and started to set up, I could tell the rain was starting to come down a little bit. The thunder was coming in. So I just wanted to get my tent set up and just get in it. It was getting dark at this point too. I finished setting up my tent like right at dark, and luckily I was pretty tired, so I just kind of hopped in. I was just hanging out in the tent, and I'm hanging out in the tent, and all of a sudden I see some lights from a truck shining through my tent, and they look like they're trying to get into a spot pretty close to my tent. Since the walls of my tent, they're not clear, so I can't quite see through them. I can't tell exactly how far something away is when inside the tent, but I just see the light getting closer, and I'm just kind of laying there, and this woman is trying to pull her truck into the spot for 20 minutes, and it's like lightning and thundering at this point hard, so it's like not ideal at all. I'm laying in my tent, in my sleeping bag, and like I said, I hear the truck getting closer, and all of a sudden I hear the truck getting like really close, so I look up and I see the corner of my tent, like pretty close to where my feet are, within like half a foot. I see the corner of my tent caving in, and it's because it's being run over by the woman in the truck. And luckily I had the wherewithal to realize that this was happening, and I pulled my legs up so they wouldn't get crushed. Luckily she only slightly pulled over the tent. She didn't like fully drive over. And I yelled out like, "What are you doing? What are you doing? You're running me over. You're running over my tent." Somehow the tent pole didn't break, which I was really surprised about. But yeah, I'm really glad I didn't get my feet or legs crushed by a truck. That would be horrible. I got out of the tent at that point and just went up and like talked to the woman, see what was up, by making sure she was good, because almost just ran me over. She seemed not drunk, but not quite sober either. She also seemed like pretty out of it. Not in like a she was on drugs type of way, but just like she had a lot on her mind, and she was like really stressed out about something, I don't know what, but she was kind of freaking out. I was mad initially, but I saw there was no point in getting more mad at her, because she was already like really flustered even before she ran me over, it sounded like, or almost ran me over. So I kind of just let it go. Like I said, when I got out of the tent, I was really mad initially, like what the, but then, you know, after talking to her for a little bit, I decided, even talking to her for like 30 seconds, I was like, well, she didn't run me over. No harm's done to the tent. I guess there's no real reason to get mad. It's only just going to make the situation worse. Next day, I went to Denver. I hung out in Ruby Hill Park, which is a beautiful park. It's huge. They had a stage area for like full concert venue. They had a mountain bike track, a couple of baseball fields, some basketball courts, plenty of just green and open grass. The Denver skyline in the background, just a great park. I can really tell that there's definitely a lot more of an outdoors vibe in that area, and people really seem to lean towards those outdoors activities, because I haven't seen that kind of funding for parks on the East Coast. It's by far the nicest park I'd ever seen. Colorado is a great state. I really like it there. After Denver, went to Fort Collins. 2 friends from college that I stayed with. They were super nice. Shout out to Kevin Cody if you're watching this. I had a good time there. Toured the New Belgium Brewery. Really cool brewery. I got lots of free beer along the way, which is always nice. Now that I've toured their brewery, definitely a fan for sure. After Fort Collins, I kind of just more or less sped home. I made it back in 3 or 4 days. Stopped in Lincoln, Nebraska for a night, stopped in Indianapolis, and stopped in Pittsburgh again, and then back in Philadelphia. And that was my journey. I'm so glad I did it. Thank you guys for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you have any comments or questions, I'll answer them all. If you're thinking about traveling, what's the best place you've traveled to? Let me know in the comments. Thanks guys. Peace.